We are the Thesterninator, welcome to the channel. We are the Thesterninator, welcome to the channel.
Hi, I'm the Thesterninator. Welcome to the channel. And today we're talking about the show Helluva Boss. That's what won our weekly free Patreon poll. And we're focusing specifically today on the 7 deadly sins, because I already focused on the main cast for the show in a previous video, and actually even covered Lucifer in a previous video focusing on Has-Been Hotel. So today we're focusing on the 7 deadly sins who remain in that court. And before we even get to that, can we talk about Patrick Page for a second? If you don't know Patrick Page, he is the voice of Satan and one of the best parts of the song Mastermind in the episode where we first get to meet the full 7 deadly sins. You may also know him as Hades from Hadestown, which very much makes me think that he's getting typecast. But I know him from my favorite Christmas movie, an Apple original movie, Spirited, featuring Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds. I remember hearing Mastermind for the first time and thinking, this sounds very similar for some reason to another song that I know in a different musical. Come to realize they're both voiced by the same actor. So amazing work, Patrick Page, keep it up. So today we're going to focus on him as well as the rest of the 7 deadly sins, turning those into Pokemon, focusing on their lore as well as their characterization in the show. And without much further ado, let's get started. Hello, I'm the Thesterninator, but my friends call me Mastermind. Welcome to the channel. While you're here, don't forget to drop down below, like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff that makes me and YouTube happy, and let's hop right into the video. Starting off, I think is everyone's new favorite character, that being Belphegor, the Sin of Sloth. I don't know what it is. I love the design so much. She is such a fun concept, just this sleepy little lamb type of character. Now, arguably going into the design, I knew I have to go lamb in some way, and ended up deciding that for the shape that was used, it would be a little bit more difficult. So I went with this alpaca llama type shape. It gave me a little bit more room to play with, while also not feeling like I had to limit myself super to that round sheep type of shape. And I know that it may go against some of the designs, but that's why these are based on and not just mimics of the characters. So I really dig the concepts here. It's a design that I really fell in love with the moment that I saw it. Maybe you did too. The second that you saw this demon, you were like, I cannot wait to learn more about you, because that's exactly where I was. So for the body shape, I wanted to make the neck and tail more bulbous, and the idea was if you were to turn this Pokemon upside down, it almost looks like a series of thought bubbles that you'd see in a comic book, leading up to that one big cloudy thought-looking shape, while also incorporating a lot of the instances that are very prominent to the character. Obviously those long eyelashes, the candles on the head, all these different parts that make up who the character is are very important to the Sin of Sloth, but translating them in some ways into the Pokemon fashion. Ton of fun, got to play with colors in really interesting ways. Those candle wicks and lights were a blast. I did decide in the end to kind of move away from the wick itself and make it feel more kind of cosmic or energy based for the lamp light type of source there. So it ended up being a lot of fun. I really dig this design. One of the biggest gripes that I have with it is I had a design that I did probably a year or two back for a dreamy alpaca type of Pokemon that would have been a great pre-evolution for this design. But at the time, I didn't know what I was gonna do with it, so I believe I ended up either selling it off or giving it away to somebody who was gonna use it for a video game project that I knew. I don't remember what happened to it. All I know is it's no longer in my possession. So, c'est la vie. I still end up with a really good concept here, really good design, one that I'm really proud of, and ultimately is one of my top favorite of the video. And we're only into number 1. I had so much fun with all of these designs that I feel like every time I came up with a new one, it became a new instant favorite. I don't know how I can contend with that or be okay with that, but the source material for these designs and the great concepts brought up by VivziePop allowed for some really fun transformation into Pokemon for this video. But for this instance, we have Alpalabra, the name coming from alpaca and candelabra. It is the deep thought Pokemon, a normal ghost type, and for the shiny I wanted to keep up that biblical ancestry and use the golden fleece as a reference. So the fur, wool, hair, whatever you want to call it, is going to be a little bit more golden for the shiny. I also wanted it to be rideable. It just felt like that fit with the sloth motif. But moving along was another character who was introduced in this episode, that being the Sin of Envy. Envy is referenced throughout multiple cultures and religions as a Leviathan, actually named Leviathan. So I played around with the idea here, especially with that two-headed feature that was prominent in VivziePop's design for the show, and I wanted to play up how do you get this two-headed creature to work. I initially thought of the idea of an eel with one of those parasites that eats out the tongue and then becomes the tongue, but it felt too much like I didn't know where I was going with the lore or the story or the understanding of how this Pokemon would function in the wild. It felt like, yeah, I'm hitting all the notes that I need to, but at the same time, I can't see this working in a fun and exciting way for a Pokemon world. And that ends up being the real struggle with these concepts, is how do you make something that is exciting and dangerous looking, or whatever it is that you're trying to capture with the emotion of the concept, while still making it feel like a Pokemon, making it feel friendly or loving or excited for you as a trainer. And ultimately, I ended up moving away from that and going to this double-ended fish, where the eel-like shape ends up becoming the tail of the actual fish. Still allows me to get that two-headed motif, still allows me to have some fun with the shapes, and still lets me get something that is cute while also daring and intimidating on the other end. And I think it works. I really, again, fell in love with this design. As you may or may not know if you've watched the channel for a while, fish Pokemon are my kryptonite, but I really feel like while playing around and figuring out what I wanted to do with this design, I fell in love with it. I dig the idea of that tail kind of being its own thing, one of them always kind of swimming backwards, and ultimately coming up with the concept that that tail can like grow and become a shadow variant of the actual fish Pokemon itself. Ton of fun, a lot of really fun and interesting colors that I got to play with for this one. Leviathan in the show is vibrant while also very stark, so it was interesting trying to find the balance between those two colors and how to make that work. Lots of purples, lots of greens, lots of white, and lots of shadow. So yeah, it ended up becoming a little bit of a struggle trying to figure out how I wanted specifically to balance out those shades. But once I decided, okay, I'm just gonna let this go wild, I think specifically of the twin dancers from Has-Been Hotel? No, from Helluva Boss. Sorry, getting those two mixed up a lot today. But thinking of the twin dancers from Helluva Boss and how we see them having that fish type of aesthetic and how they use kind of that neon light, very much feeling like deep sea type of animals, I wanted to capture that. I felt like that was really the direction that I needed to go to make this design just work, to make it pop, was rather than trying to dive away from these bright and vibrant colors, diving headfirst into them and utilizing them to separate the two emotions of these Pokemon. And so this is Enviathan. Enviathan's name combines Envy and Leviathan. It is the mimic fish Pokemon and is a water ghost type. This is a fun one because I always love when I have such stark color like this that I get to play with the shiny, in this case inverting the purple and pinkish of those two to make it just a really fun concept. Now, Mammon is such a big part of the first couple of seasons of the show that I knew I couldn't leave him out, but I was honestly so stumped on what to do with the design that what you're seeing here is actually the third or fourth iteration of that concept. Some people say that he's meant to be a spider, others say he's meant to be a tick, and there's good evidence for both. He does relax in a big spider web in the end of 2 Minutes Notice, which is the best song of Helluva Boss. But I digress. I didn't know quite where to go with that, so yeah, this is about the third or fourth iteration. I'm curious what you guys think. Is that something you're interested in seeing? The failed versions of these, the beta concepts that I had for these designs? If so, let me know down in the comments. I usually end up getting about 2/3 of the way done, usually line work, sometimes full color, even sometimes full render, and decide I don't like the direction that I went and scrap it completely. Right now you can find all of those in my trash bin, but I'm very curious if that's something you guys are interested in seeing, because yeah, a lot of ideas seem really good at the outset with these designs, but as I get to the end or get closer to the finish line on them, I start to realize I'm kind of just checking boxes. You know what I mean? I'm not necessarily making a design that I'm happy with, but it does check the boxes of what I'm trying to do. And so they end up getting scrapped so that I can make something that I can say that I'm proud of. And honestly, this design is one that I am so proud of. I was able to incorporate that jester hat slash crown type of look into both the body and the face while keeping some of those insectoid type shapes, and utilizing the phrase talking out of the side of your mouth, which usually means lying or saying something that isn't necessarily a lie but also isn't necessarily true, and using that to inform the mandibles. So if you look at the mandibles of this design, they're actually a big yellow grin that is separated so that it is talking, eating, doing what it can out of the side of the mouth. Very much referencing that phrase, and I dig that so much. It was such a fun little idea that I got to play with throughout this design, and I think the hardest part of that was getting past that idea and thinking, okay, but what comes next? And ultimately, I love this spider. Bug types are another one of my kryptonites because I feel like a bug is such on the cusp of something that can be wild and crazy and still look like a bug, but needs to be toned down enough to still feel like a Pokemon. And I feel like we hit a really good balance with this Mammon-inspired Pokemon. I feel like it gets a lot of the good in there, some of the bad. There are definitely some areas that I would look at and refine a little bit more, but ultimately, top to bottom, over the course of this entire drawing, this is a design that I fell in love with. And I know I've said that before, I know I've said that a million times now, but each time that I got to draw inspiration from these sins, I found myself just falling in love with the design. And this spider it was such a joy to come out with. In the end, it was something I was happy with, it was something that I felt met the criteria, and it was something that felt like it was worth it going through those several iterations. And so this is Maramid. Maramid's name comes from Mammon and Arachnid kind of smooshed together. It is the greedy eater Pokemon and is a bug psychic type for how Mammon kind of draws people in like flies to the slaughter in a way. So I wanted to incorporate that with the shiny being bathed in full gold, really mimicking that greed. Real quick, I want to take a second to talk about today's sponsor, Opus Clip. Opus Clip is a fantastic product because it's great for creators like me, people who have videos that they make on a regular basis, but turning those into shorts or clips means just as much effort as making a full video. Opus Clip fixes that problem. It's as easy as grabbing the link from your video or dropping the video itself into the search bar in Opus Clip, and within a couple minutes, Opus Clip turns that into several different clips, verifying where the high points and low points of those clips are, telling you just how viable they are as entertainment and content, and then allowing you to download those clips. It's a really great product that I use all the time and has saved me a ton of time and energy when making new content. So make sure to check out Opus Clip. I'll have a link down in the description below where you can see their different packages as well as their free options. So all that said, let's get back to the video. Now we can't move any further without talking about Beelz, or Beelzebub, the sin of gluttony. I must applaud Vivziepop on this for going in such a very different direction for the sin of gluttony than I think any of us would have thought. Very cool character who takes into account that land of milk and honey type of vibe, how milk and honey were seen as indulgences that one may very easily overindulge into, with bringing those into the landscape of this character. I really dig the design, and it had a lot of areas that I could have gone. We could have gone the insect route, we could have gone the fox route, we could have gone that liquidy type of energy that emanates from the character type of route. Ultimately, I tried to capture a little bit of everything. And while I'll go ahead and spoil you, it's not a bug type, I wanted to get some of those aspects in here, like making the eyelashes continue to extend out, very much like the character does, into these antenna-like shapes, giving it a little bit more of a posture that's more diminutive, as well as also capturing that fox type of energy to it. I dig the idea, and I know I'm going to get a ton of people who come into the comments saying she's not a fox, she's a wolf, or she's a dog, and I'm just going with what jumps into my brain immediately. I love the design of the character, but very much reads fox to me, especially given the personality that they give her. I won't go any further into that, thank you for not asking. Anyway, I wanted to get some of the slenderness that goes into the legs here, as well as giving it that fluid tail. That was one of those aspects that I knew I couldn't move away from, and if you know me, using those gradient cloud-like shapes and colors and patterns to different designs is a weakness of mine. I will jump on it anytime I am given the opportunity. I love that texture, and I feel like it really emanates a certain level of power above what your standard Pokemon is. I picture all of these Pokemon that we've been designing in this video kind of fitting in a same niche. Not necessarily like a mythical trio or legendaries or anything like that, but hitting a certain aesthetic that I think adds to some form of story. These 7 characters, again, one of which we saw in a previous video, but the 6 characters from today's video, as well as that character being drawn into this story element that I'd love to play with. As per usual, you may have noticed without our dex entries that we've left out our abilities. I would love to hear what you guys think the abilities for these Pokemon could be, and how you think they may fit together, what their role is in this grander story. You guys are so much more talented at that than I am, so I would love to hear what you think in the comments down below. We'll get a little bit of it towards the end of the video, but for the moment, I am very curious how we're gonna see these things play together. But back to the design. I love the design. The big struggle came from incorporating those insect type motifs into it, but also with the coloring. Balancing out that yellow, that white with the big vibrant colors that we have here, because the character of Beelze has so much energy to her that it emanates out in these colorful rainbow type of patterns. And I'm hoping that I captured that pretty well. So this is Meowny. I wanted something that felt short, felt small, and it's a reference to milk and honey, mixing both of those words together. So it is the milk and honey Pokemon, and is a pure fairy type. I could have gone fairy bug, but I felt like I didn't capture enough of the bug type of style in the design to make it make as much sense as I'd hope. But where is Asmodeus? Where is Asmodeus, I hear you cry? I must say the character of Asmodeus really grew on me, going from what I assumed was a one-note character, this nightclub owner who had something against the main characters, to becoming the heart and soul, in my opinion, of so many of the plot lines and storylines of Helluva Boss, at least in its first seasons. So I wanted to do it a little bit of justice here. The problem was, when looking up the animals that make up Asmodeus for reference, it ended up being the head of a bull, a man, and a ram, and the tail of a serpent, but also being associated with scorpions and rabbits. Yes, that is so much detail that I'm reading that off of my phone rather than just reciting it from memory. Because how do you incorporate all of those in? I'm sure if I had a little bit more time, I could, but I wanted to do something that really fit the energy, really fit the vibe that we're going for, without straying too far into the hyper fantastical. I feel like each of these characters has fantastical backstory to them, but at the same time feels very grounded in some of the design elemental ways. So here I decided to focus more on the rooster side, because I feel like in the show, that's what's shown a lot more than the rest. I mean, we have that kind of beaky type of face, we have the rooster tails, the backwards legs, all that good stuff. So I focused mainly on that, but who knows? Maybe in the future I'll focus on everything else and make it feel a little bit more beastly. But I'm pretty happy with the way that this one turned out. I feel like it captures a lot of that lust type of energy, really fits that vibe, without straying too far away from something that feels like it could work as a Pokemon. I say that knowing that Enamorus is something that already exists, but that's beside the point. The point is I'm making a rooster about a demon, and we're all here for it. So I went in with this blue to give it kind of that willowy wisp type of energy that we see in Asmodeus' head shape, focusing mainly on blues. While I know that Asmodeus is a very colorful character, I wanted to, again, kind of pare this down a little bit, and I'm hoping that by the end of the video, we'll come to understand why some of these decisions were made. I know it's a little bit hard to wrap your head around now. You may look and say, well, I feel like you didn't go as hard as you could have with some of these designs. Trust me, if that's what you're thinking, you're definitely going to want to stick around to the end of the video, because I feel like Asmodeus as a character really just clutches onto the concept that we're going for here. So I went in with those blues and those pinks, really made it feel soft, very much more a Fizzaroli type of color scheme here, but sticking with those ghostly type of wisps to the shape. Also mimicking not just a rooster, but a couple different birds all in one. I wanted it to still feel like an amalgam without feeling like we were straying so far out of the ballpark that we were missing whatever mark we came up with. And so this is Asmotrice. Asmotrice's name is a reference to Asmodeus as well as Cockatrice, which is a rooster mixed with a bunch of other animals. It is the preening Pokemon, naturally, and is a flying ghost type. And I must say, I dig that shiny. Black and white shinies, I feel like can sometimes be a little overplayed, but I dig this. Next comes the sin of wrath, Satan. The reason that we're in the situation that we're in the first place in the show. He's currently sitting on the throne, and he is often referenced in different ideas and beliefs as a dragon. Simple, right? Stern, draw a dragon. You can draw a dragon. You've drawn dragons before. Dragon is a very simple Pokemon staple. Harder, more difficult, easier said than done. So I went in and decided I'm going to draw on references to other dragons and fire and magma based characters who already exist, looking at characters like Charizard, specifically the mega forms of Charizard, as well as Groudon, because as I began to draw this design, leaning heavily on VivziePop's version of the character, I began to see some similarities. Again, I could have said, well, then we have to stray away completely, we have to change everything up, we have to make this feel 100% different than what we're already seeing, or we could lean even more into it, make it feel like there's a history here. Like all of these dragons and magma fire-based Pokemon who exist in the Pokemon world in some way are references to this creature, this one that is meant to control fire. Not just in a sense that it is a Pokemon who is fire type, but in a sense of it is ancient, it has existed for so long. I even actually started to draw a reference on some of the earliest Game Freak ideas for Mega Charizard when they decided, what if he just gets old? And utilize that as kind of a base for this concept. I mean, think about it. What's more scary than something that's familiar? And when focusing on demons, that familiarity is what makes them so scary, is that you should know this. You should not be afraid of something that you understand, and yet it's been twisted and corrupted in some way. So I decided to focus on the idea of this twisted, corrupted Charizard. It's so often that we see in different dragon type of stories that the evil villain dragon is just the dark shadow of our hero. So I played with those ideas, played with those concepts, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. True, it's not 100% original, but it hits all of the ideas that we wanted to hit with the character of Satan from VivziePop's version of him. It references in lore actual Pokemon who already exists. It references new ideas and new concepts that are brought in given the design elements of this character. And I feel like it hits every note that it needs to hit without feeling like I'm just checking boxes. It was a fun design. It continues to be a fun design, one that I'm really proud of, and I think is able to stray far enough away from all of those initial inspirations that it can still feel like its own Pokemon. I often have to tell myself that when coming up with these is, what are the comments gonna say? Oh, they're gonna say, oh, it looks too similar to that, too similar to this. But I have to tell myself, well, if that's the point, then it's kind of okay, right? Eventually, I just have to do something that I'm happy with, something that I feel works, and say, okay, that's what we made. And so this is Drazitan, bringing in that sizzle, that dragon, and that Satan type of energy to the name there. It is the Infernal Rage Pokemon, again, referencing that Wrath circle that it comes from. It is a Fire Dark type with the highest stat total that we've seen so far in this video, and that black and purple shiny just to double up on the cool factor. But our work is not yet finished. You see, as I said before, each of these designs feels very grounded. That was my intention. It's not until you introduce them to this special item, a geometress, reference to the sacred geometry that makes up a lot of darker religious circles. Using this item, you could unleash each of these designs, but that'll be something for a future video. So make sure to join in on the Patreon so you can be a part of these free polls. If you want to hear more of this story and how these Pokemon expand in power, shape, and size, then next time that Helluva Boss comes up, make sure to vote. If you like these designs and want to own some for yourself, make sure to check out the Ko-fi. I drop designs there once a month with huge unloads of everything from previous videos that I'm not going to be using in future projects. You can also become a YouTube member for just $3 a month. That gets you in exclusive giveaways as well as getting videos early and some videos exclusive to YouTube members. And as per usual, we have our Discord link down below as well. Come and become a part of that ever-growing community. You know, they say that hell has frozen over when something crazy has happened, so every member now gets a free toboggan when they get there. And with all that said, it sounds like you know where to find me, and I'll catch you in the next one. But before we go, I want to thank all of the supporters and people who help make these videos possible. Specifically, I want to give a shout out to some of our higher tier supporters, those being Ko-fi supporter, King Squid, Yuji Sakaki, Lex Wright, Drake Null, Jeremy Sunday, Justin Grenier, Siren Sprague, Daniel, Kaylin Cat, Soren Frost, Styx TV, and Dan Bush. And of course, a big McThankies from McSpankies to all of our YouTube members whose names I will now be reciting in the ancient tongue.
Nigel Felix Smith, Zed Ravenmore, Sunny Stars, Arctic Rose Creations, Buddha Pen, Tuck, Umbrella Aquinas, Ash the Green Dragon, Aaron Best, Big Deep, Brian Adams, Frostbite 3, Anastasia Mario, Tinter, Justin Grenier, Tobias Does Things, King Totodile, Michael Art, Sigil Sealed, Kaylin Cat, and Crumble McSwizzle.
Thank you guys all so much for being a part of the community, and bye.